I'm David Rattray, the CEO of Unite LA. And today with the Senator, we're going to dive deeply into issues that face our California's childcare system. But I want to just frame this issue a little bit by acknowledging that Unite LA has continued to focus on children and families and the challenges they face to get access to high quality childcare and education. We put out something we call Principles for a New Economy, which was to share with policymakers both locally in the state and nationally some of the key principles that we thought should help guide them as they think about restructuring and advancing the economy and the society post-pandemic. Many of you know, but tragically, lack of childcare has become the reason why 1 in 4 women, especially women of color, have left the workforce during the pandemic. There are estimates as high as 8,500 licensed childcare sites in California had to close during the pandemic. And more, of course, of us as employees have had to face sort of the reality and the challenge that without access to childcare, we cannot go back to work during the pandemic. So this issue has always been a challenge for especially our families of color, but even more crucial now, we've come to experience it during the pandemic. So with that, we asked a distinguished leader in California, and I'm going to turn over the honor of introducing our senator to our newly appointed president of Unite LA, Alicia Bell. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you so much, David. I'm so happy to be here today to welcome today's speaker, California State Senator Connie Leyva, who is serving her 2nd term representing the 20th State Senate District. She serves as chair of the Senate Education Committee and the Senate Democratic Caucus. She's a lifelong activist standing up for working people and for families. She was raised in Chino, California, and in 2004, she was elected as the first woman president of the California Labor Federation, which represents more than 2.1 million workers throughout the state. She and her husband live in Chino and are the proud parents of adult twin daughters, Allie and Jessie. She has been a tremendous leader and recently helped secure the first rate increase for childcare workers since 2016. Along with pay raises, 200,000 new childcare slots will be added over the next 4 years. I'm going to pause there and hand it over to the senator, who will share more details about these recent accomplishments with all of us. Welcome, Senator Leyva.
Thank you, Alicia. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you, Unite LA and Hollywood Chamber of Commerce for having me today. David, thank you very much. I'm very excited to have this conversation on how we can all work together to ensure that California's children have the strongest possible start so they can achieve their fullest potential. As we know, they are our future leaders. These issues are important and definitely not mutually exclusive. Traditionally, childcare has been seen as a personal issue, but the pandemic has shown us that it is not. It is a societal issue and an issue that is clearly important to workers, to families, and to businesses. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today and these issues related to affordable and quality early care and education, which are so critically important to California's families. As you just heard, I reintroduced the Child Care Stabilization Formula, SB 246, last year, which we had put on hold the previous year because we were focusing on making sure that we were able to reverse the proposed the proposed 10% provider cuts. 246 sought to establish a single regionalized reimbursement rate system for childcare, preschool, and early learning services. I've always believed that we needed to restructure how we reimburse providers to allow them to keep their doors open and to serve more children, which ultimately helps more families and especially working women. Provider rates must also be raised equitably across the board, regardless of the type and location of the provider. As I've said many times before, it is vital that we invest in childcare providers, since without quality and affordable childcare, there will be no lasting recovery, as parents and especially working moms will not be able to return to work. So I was very excited last year when over 2 billion in one-time and ongoing funds were put in the budget for childcare reimbursement rate reform, which was included in the 21-22 budget. We have to pay childcare workers a fair and living wage for the important work they do. These are our youngest learners and really our most important people, right? Either our children or our grandchildren and our future leaders, as I've said before. Earlier this year, I introduced SB 276, which is universal preschool. Specifically, SB 976, will make sure that parents have the option to send their children to a public elementary school provider or a community-based childcare provider to benefit from universal preschool. This bill will help protect the stability of jobs for teachers at community-based providers, which employ primarily women and women of color. If these care facilities in the community close, which can certainly happen to many of them if we do not expand flexibility, and we know many of them closed during the pandemic, these women will lose their jobs and families will have even fewer options for their children. As working parents will tell you, in order to make options realistic, we need to allow for full day options and flexible hours, such as early drop-off, late pickup, weekend care, and year-round care. So thank you for having me, and I'm excited about our conversation and look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
Thank you, Senator. I just want to take the privilege to just thanking you for your courageous leadership on this issue. We need legislators like you fighting for our little kids. It's not the topic over the last decade or two that has often had fierce leadership from Sacramento. Let me just start out a little bit, if I could be a tiny bit personal too, like how are you doing through COVID? How are you personally and your family? How's everybody been faring?
Thank you for that question, David. I was just having this conversation with some folks yesterday that we are gearing up and all of a sudden we're back like almost like nothing happened. And honestly, it's been a really tough 2 years. Personally, not too tough for my husband and I because it was just the two of us and our dog. But we have grown children who have children, we have grandchildren, and making sure that they had access to safe daycare because both my daughters and their spouses work. So kind of navigating that with them. And then just being very different here in Sacramento. It's kind of nice to see people again here in the building. And I believe yesterday, Monday, we started back with full staff. We have not had full staff in our SAC offices or district offices. So it's really nice to have everybody back and working. And I think everybody's really happy because, you don't get into this job if you don't like people. And so being able to see people and work together is great. So I do think that the pandemic has changed us. I hope in a good way. I hope that we all appreciate the things that are most important a little more, which are our families, which are our children. So I feel like after the pandemic, this rate reform and universal preschool is just such the next logical step, even though we've been working on it for years as a Women's Caucus. So doing well, David, thank you. And I hope you are too.
And what's it feel like? You started saying this, but can you go to a hearing now if I'm?
Yes.
So,
yes. So we've, it's a combination of Zoom and of going to in-person hearings. In-person's always the best. And now that we feel that it's safe for everyone to do so is great. But we still do a combination of things. I think what we learned during the pandemic is, look at all of us can get together via Zoom and nobody had to get on a plane. Nobody had to drive someplace. So I hope we'd still do both. I hope we still have in-person meetings and we can still do Zoom. But yes, we are doing hearings in person, which we actually have been the entire pandemic. The difference was it was just us, the legislators in the hearing, and we do still have people in the Senate. The public is able to call in, which I think is great. We didn't have that before. People would drive from my district 6.5 hours so that they could just say, hi, I'm Connie Leyva and I support this bill or I oppose this bill. Now people can call in, so it makes government a little bit more accessible.
Right. Well, so now let's start on the budget if we can,
Okay.
Senator. What are you most excited about with this year's budget as you get closer to budget season?
Well, I'm very excited that we have a lot of money. It's nice to be here during a time when the challenge is figuring out how to spend it and where to put it. So that is obviously a challenge because when there's a lot of money, everybody's like, "Oh, I have an idea. I have an idea," which is great. We'd like to hear those ideas. But I think what I'm excited about is that we'll use this money for things. As you know, I'm the chair of Senate Education, and so education, early learning, higher education, those are all very important issues for me. But we're going to invest in green school buses, which I think is just huge because people may not know that school buses are one of the number one polluters, and we put our little people on them every day. So using the money to invest in that. Early learning rate reform, SB 246 was just the beginning. Now we have to continue to fully fund that. And then expanded learning, new career pathways, and special education. That's all money that we have enough to do. There's lots of other things, but I'll leave it at the education world because that's what
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
talking about. So I'm excited about all of that.
Now, what challenges do we have with the GAN limit this year? I think a lot of us are trying to understand with this exciting, sort of opportunity with the additional resources. How does the GAN limit kick in, and what effect will it have this year?
Yeah, so the GAN limit is a problem, and that is something that was a ballot measure from the 70s. So there is talk, there is talk about maybe having to do something about that later on down the road. But right now, that is what we have. And so the GAN limit is really hard when we're looking at things for ongoing funding. So
So can I interrupt one
yes.
second? I just jumped right into it. Can you explain a little bit to some of our participants, what is the GAN limit?
I should have a better answer for that. All I really know is it was a proposition that was put on the ballot to say that if the state ever has too much money, then we have to figure out a way to give some of that back to people in the state of California. We can't use it for ongoing funding because we don't know what next year will hold. We can use it for one-time funding. So this is going to be a great year to do a lot of infrastructure, not just in transportation, but also maybe in our schools, some of our state buildings. And so we can use it. We can use it for educational and education and infrastructure. Our schools need help. So we'll use the money for that. But yeah, that's not the best explanation, but it kind of gives you an overview. If you look it up online, it'll give you a better explanation. All I know is we have to be careful how we spend it.
Right. Well, so let's talk about childcare. Let's talk about preschool. And so first of all, let me just give you a chance to expand a little bit on SB 976. We're really, as you might know, United LA has been a fierce advocate and have helped engage a lot of business leaders all over the California to understand the importance of pre-K, of childcare. And we were extremely excited about the commitment that the governor and you all made last year to get to universal pre-K. But we believe deeply in the mixed delivery system. And we're a little worried about are we almost going too fast in a way that builds off of the school district platform and not respecting the assets that we have with these childcare center-based systems and CBOs. So we're really fascinated by how you approach this bill. So I'd love to have you go deeper on that.
Okay, that I could do for you. So when we did TK last year, I will be very candid. I voted for it, but had questions and concerns because transitional kindergarten is great for folks who don't have to have their children in daycare or preschool, or they don't need full day childcare. So I said, we're doing something that is going to help, in my opinion, wealthy people who can take their kids at 9 o'clock and pick them up at noon, and it's no problem. I have always worked full time. When my girls were little, I dropped them off about 7:30 each morning, got to work at 8, and then pick them up at 5:30. So TK would not have worked for me. So what got me started thinking about 976 and universal preschool was, how do we build on this excitement and energy that we have around transitional kindergarten, but how do we help working parents and really working moms, because during the pandemic, over 6,000 daycares closed. And so that meant that not only did the women working there lose their jobs, then the women who decided to quit their jobs and stay home and watch their kids because they maybe didn't make as much as their male spouse, which is another issue that we have to address when it comes to women's wages. But this just seemed like a way to me to make sure that we could help these childcare centers that we saw really struggle during the pandemic, help the children and make sure that they are getting what they need, and making sure that we can really just helping everyone. Transitional kindergarten will be great for folks who can do it and access it, but universal preschool, in my opinion, was even more important than transitional kindergarten. But transitional kindergarten came first. That's fine. And then the other thing that I worried about with transitional kindergarten is so many of my schools, I have 11 cities, and I've only heard from one city who said they could actually accommodate transitional kindergarten, because you have to have different classrooms, you have to have the little potties, you have to have a whole different structure. And a lot of our schools either don't have the room, all their classrooms are full, or they have to do work to make sure that they can accommodate these 4-year-olds. So to me, this is something that helps bridge that gap. We'll get to transitional kindergarten, but it's going to take a little while. Universal preschool benefits everyone. Everyone can benefit from that. So that was kind of my thinking on why we proposed it, and my hopes, and what it will, the challenges it will help to alleviate.
That's terrific. How's it doing? How's the
Good.
bill doing, Senator? We're proud to be supporters, by the way, but tell us how you feel about the prospects of the bill.
You know what? I feel like it's good. I've said since I was elected, always have the inarguable argument. And how the heck do you argue against not making sure that our children have a safe place to go so mom and dad can go to work? We have a big budget ask. It's about $750 million. But the most important thing is getting the structure in place for universal preschool, kind of like we did with rate reform, making sure we have the structure. And this year we are asking for more money, and years going forward, we will be able to continue to fill the structure that we put in place with 246. So I think the bill's going great. It got out of Senate Education last week. So yeah, I think it had no votes.
And so it'll have to go through the budget sub and get into the full budget for the Senate. You feel optimistic that it'll be funded in the budget?
I do. And people have always asked me that. And I always tell them, I go, you have to be optimistic about your bills, and you have to know and feel in your heart that they are going to get funded, or it would be depressing to do this work.
Right. So I want to ask you about paid family leave, if you're okay. Can I shift to, I was honored to be asked to serve on the governor's paid family leave task force. I don't know if you're aware of that, and we put together a plan that the governor advanced to expand leave towards 6 months for a mom and a mom, or a mom and a dad, or dad and a dad, and other family members. And we also did job protection, if you remember, 2 years ago, not without some serious concerns.
That was rough. That should not have been that hard. I got very frustrated with many of my colleagues.
I have some scars on my back from that one. But the biggest thing that we all believed in, Senator, or I won't say the biggest, but one huge part was wage replacement. As you probably know, we reimburse at 70%. For low-income moms and dads. And if you're only making minimum wage, that's not a true option.
No.
So a large portion of Californians do not take advantage of a plan that they actually pay into. So as you probably know, Senator Durazo has a bill this year, SB 951, which we're sponsors of. And I wonder if you could just talk to our participants a little bit about why it matters to do those tranches, sort of have the mom or dad be able to stay home with their new baby, and then move to a well-funded childcare system and a well-funded universal pre-K system that your bill solves for. Can you just address that a little bit?
Absolutely. It is stunning to me that the United States of America and California has not done a better job of making sure that when women have a baby, that they can stay home take care of the child, and get their wages reimbursed. We, of all industrialized countries, I can't remember exactly where we fall, but we fall very low on the scale. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, way down. We are not doing a good job. But as evidenced by 2 years ago, when we were trying to get this bill off the floor just to make sure your job was guaranteed,
Mhm.
we had so many people, women, some of whom I called out, that did not support that. And I just truly don't understand as a country and as the state of California why we don't do that. Very supportive of Senator DeRozo's bill. It makes perfect sense that we should do full reimbursement. And as you said, David, people who are taking time off to care for that child are not they're not reaping the benefit of a system that they have paid into. So you have a child, and it's very stressful. Anyone watching who has had a child knows that you're so excited to have this little person come into your life, and then they get there and you're like, holy cow, this is really hard and this is a lot of work. And if you now have to also have the burden of worrying about, are we going to be able to pay our bills? I have to buy diapers for this little critter, which are not cheap. I may have to buy formula if I'm not breastfeeding. And so providing full wage reimbursement is absolutely critical. The part for me that's hard, David, is I don't know how we get people who don't believe in it to believe in it. Because to me, it's a fundamental belief that you should have. And I know we hear about people that it'll be hard on business and whatnot. Well, what would be harder on business if the mom then decides she's going to quit and not come back to work at all, or the
Yeah.
dad? I mean, I think sometimes we are very short-sighted when we think about these things, and we should really think about the long-term impacts. And let's just think about society. We know that that first year is critical in a child's life. So we're looking at the employee and what we want them to do, come back to work, or we don't want to pay you your full reimbursement of your wages. But this little person will someday be in the workforce. Don't we want them to have the absolute best start? So mom and dad can take care of them. Like you said, mom and mom, dad and dad, mom and dad, whatever that family unit is, making sure that they are being paid their full wages so they can take care of this little person. And then they go to universal preschool, and then they go to TK, and then they start in school. So it's just critical that we pass this legislation and even do more than that. I mean, how do we make sure women who give birth to children have more time off? My God, if you have a child, your body needs to heal, for crying out loud. And sometimes mentally you have, postpartum depression. So I could go on about this. I have very strong feelings about all of this, but we can do better in the state of California, and we can certainly do better in the country.
So we're hoping on this particular bill, we had a big challenge, as you and I have acknowledged, on job return and job protection with some of the business community. This bill is really just simply improving wage replacement. It
Yes.
doesn't affect any other factor except just make it affordable. So we're hoping there'll be a much broader set of supporters of this bill, and love any of your advice on how do we build cover and support for the legislature and the governor to get to a yes on this bill.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. I do feel like the governor is probably, I think he believes in this. I certainly know the first partner, his wife, believes in this. But how do we get it to him so that we can hopefully get him to sign it? I think it's meeting with people, insisting on meetings with legislators in both houses, and just, having the arguments ready when they say, well, businesses can't afford it. Okay, then what do we need to do for those businesses? What is it that we are asking for? Because this has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, like I said, it has long-term ramifications that we may not even see for 20 years or 18 years when the child graduates from high school and goes into the workforce or goes to college. So I think meeting with people and just really, sometimes it's just kind of thumping on them and just saying, why can't we do this? And really, for me, I always said, people, we are the wealthiest country in the world. We are in California, the fifth largest economy in the world, and we can't make this happen. how is it all these other countries have figured it out? So I can probably be a little less nice than maybe you guys have to be when you meet with people. But the most important thing is just to meet with people, meet with legislators, make sure that they know that this is a priority for you. It's a priority for everyone really in the state of California. And then if you have anybody in particular you'd like me to talk to, I'm happy to do that too.
We we do need more champions on the assembly side for this bill, by the way.
Okay. Okay.
Uh,
I'll talk to Majority Leader Reyes. We see each other on the plane all the time.
and one of the things that we've come to appreciate even more too, as we've gotten deeper into paid family leave, is the advocates around paid family leave are very different sometimes than the advocates around childcare in preschool.
Yes.
And it's been enlightening to me to learn about why it's important to connect all those dots. Because as you know, just at a practical level, childcare for infants is the most expensive
Yes.
and the least desirable to not allow the mom or the birth parents to actually be the first caretakers. So why would you supplant them for a 2-month-old baby and then spend the amount of money you have to spend? So we're trying to, and we like that the governor's master plan for early learning connects that strategically and says the whole continuum in phases ought to be fully funded, from paid family leave to well-funded childcare to well-funded preschool. So that's part of the argument we're making, by the way.
And I think you say that exactly right. It's a continuum, David. And so many times here in Sacramento, we kind of do things in silos. Oh, we're just going to look at this, but we don't look at how it affects something else. And I think that that's a great argument, is talking about the continuum. And you're 100% right. Don't we want parents to be the first caregivers? One of our daughters, her little girl, our little Lizzie, went to daycare at 3 months. And, because mom had to get back to work and dad's working also. And we're just fortunate that she's in a wonderful setting and she's thriving and loves it. And also my daughter and son-in-law, fortunate enough that they make enough money that they could pay for it, because it is very expensive. So it's kind of a trade-off. We don't want to reimburse families so that they can stay home, but yet we want them to go back to work and pay so much of their income. And then how many times do we lose women to the workforce because they're the ones who stay home because their wages are less than their counterpart? And then that gets into a whole nother issue of, what is the biggest population of folks living in poverty? Women over 65, because they don't always have access to a pension. So the ramifications are very big.
So let's talk about childcare a little bit more now. We've talked about the first few months of life, and we talked about 3 and 4-year-olds. You talked about the rate reform that you got through last year. We're still way short on slots.
Yes.
The estimates we saw last year we're about 500,000 short, and we put in you all got 200,000 or so through. That still leaves us with 200,000 or 300,000 parents that can't afford childcare and don't have publicly funded childcare available. What are we going to do about that?
So we do have a budget request from the Women's Caucus to increase that. And then also we have increased funding request for 246 for rate reform, which will increase the slots. I was a little disappointed with the 200,000 slots last year, because as you know, David, it's not near enough. I can tell you that since I've been here, this is my 8th year in the Senate, and the Women's Caucus, well before I got here, has been championing and working on slots to make sure that these families who need it will have it. So it's a hard one, because I just feel like we just keep making a little bit of progress and a little bit of progress. It would be nice if we could make a lot of progress in 1 or 2 years, 1 or 2 budget cycles, to really kind of solve this problem. And I do think we'll get there. I do think with rate reform and the structure, and every year asking for and allocating more money in the budget, I do think we'll get there. I just, unfortunately, it's not as soon as we would like and that we need.
So you touched on this earlier, but I'd like you to expand on it. And that's the need that so many working families have, that have different shifts, have to work an evening shift or a night shift or a weekend, or have 2 jobs. And the childcare system is not built that way, and we don't fund it adequately. Can you talk a little bit more about how do we build the capacity to allow someone to have affordable childcare regardless of what work shift they have?
Yeah, so I would first start with, wouldn't it be wonderful if big employers actually provided childcare for their employees? I think that's something we don't examine enough or put enough pressure on big employers to do that or add that. I mean, to me, childcare is just as important as healthcare and, and a pension. If you have small children and you want this person to come to work, why not have childcare there for them? I mean, even here at the Capitol, we don't do a great job. We have many families who we have a childcare facility, but it is oversubscribed. So how do we get employers? We were just having this conversation the other day about how do we do a better job here and then expect employers to do better as well. But it's also changing the way we look at childcare. I mean, right now, I'll just use my daughter where she takes our grandchild as an example because it's fresh in my mind. You can drop off as early as 6 a.m. and pick up as late as 6:30 p.m. But what if I'm working at Amazon and I don't go into work until midnight and I work until 8? So really looking at how we change what's available, that's going to be hard because, now not only are we asking these childcare providers to do really God's work for not a lot of money, we are asking them to do it in the middle of the night. I remember when I worked for UFCW and I was the president of the local. And I remember we were out visiting night crews and talking to a stalker who worked at Albertsons, and he had 3 children. They were 10, I think it was 10, 8, and 6. And he was a single dad. And I said, what do you do when you're here? He goes, they're in bed asleep. And I just hope that everything goes okay while I'm at work. That was 20 years ago. And that has stood with me for all these years because I thought about how terrified I would be if I felt that was the only option I had for my children. When I ran my local union, we had a plot of land that we owned next to the building. And before I left, I had always hoped we could build a childcare center there for grocery workers. And it never materialized. But I think until we really, as a society, as communities, as a state, decide we're going to do this, I don't know when it will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see in the chat, Mary Estrada talked about employer-sponsored childcare, just like you're referencing.
Yes.
In Amgen, I guess in my neck of the woods, Thousand Oaks provides it. Unfortunately, very few companies do, and it's more available to professional employees, not the kind that I was a UFCW member too, by the way. I'm really proud that they settled the contract with the chains a couple of weeks ago without
And it's
strike.
a great contract. It is a historic contract.
Yeah, I can tell. I'm really pleased for them.
Me too.
And I worked the graveyard myself. And fortunately, my wife was able to stay home and take care of our kids, but I just can't imagine how it would have been for me if I was single mom in that situation or single parent. So let's talk about higher ed a little bit. I'm going to ask you a little bit about higher ed as it relates to this issue of our workforce, but also, if you'll let me too, I'll ask you a little bit about Grant Modernization, a bill that we're a co-sponsor with too, that we're excited about. But as it relates to our workforce for childcare, we obviously need to develop a new workforce of childcare for universal pre-K, but we should do it in privileging the incumbent workforce to make sure that they have a way to stay in the profession themselves that they've been underpaid with. How are we going to do both of those things? How do we provide the pipeline for that kind of future workforce at a higher level of education, but at the same time, don't leave behind the heroes that have been taking care of our babies for the last few decades?
That's right. Oh, it's a big task, but it's one that we have to embrace because it's not going away. And I go back to rate reform, and I think that it's really the beginning of how we get to everything that we need. These workers have been underpaid. These women have been underpaid for so many years, and now that we are actually putting money into the budget to fund the rate reform and the reimbursement rates, we can start paying these women, hopefully, a living wage. Because how do you ask someone to go to school and further their education to make $15 an hour? I just don't think we can do that. And then when we do ask these women to go back to school, we need to provide education grants. We can't ask them to live on this low wage and then pay for education as well.
Right.
We have to, as a state, fund that and make sure that that happens. And talking about the workers that we don't want to let behind who have been doing the job for so many years. My mom was an instructional aide in elementary schools in Chino. She was a CSEA member for 35 years.
Mhm.
And I remember, gosh, she's been retired now for about 10 years, but probably 10 years before she retired, the state passed a law saying that they call them para educators, that
Mhm.
they had to go back to school and do some educational work and whatnot and get an AA degree. And I remember my mom saying, "Oh my gosh, I've done this for 25 years and now they want me to go back to school." She's like, "I'm too old." Well, ultimately what they did is they grandfathered folks in who had been there for X amount of years. And I think we could do something similar with our childcare providers that we have now. They know what they're doing. I look at the women when I pick up my granddaughter at preschool, and they're just amazing. And they love these kids so much. They know what works, they know what doesn't work. So I think we need to have the extended education for maybe new folks coming into the field, which would make people feel good, right? I mean, I want to make sure that I am the best I can be at whatever my profession is. But again, we've got to provide grants for these women to go back to school. We can't expect them to do it. But most importantly, and so really everything comes down to money. Most importantly, we have to pay them a living wage.
Mhm.
I mean, I think, you know, you look at some of these women might be making $17, $18 an hour. We know that $15 an hour, if you're lucky enough to work 40 hours a week, is only $600 a week. And that's not, you can't find an apartment or a home or whatnot if you don't have a partner who is making more money. So again, I think it just goes back to, what are we willing to do in the state of California and say that our youngest workers and the folks that do the work are a priority for us. And I will say this too, women are doing this work. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times we think of it as women's work. Men wouldn't do what they do. They wouldn't help these little ones get potty trained and whatnot
Mhm.
for $15, $17 an hour. So how do we say to not only the children, but to the women, we value you, we
Right.
respect you, we appreciate what you're doing? Well, you do that by making sure they have a living wage. So a lot of it just comes down to money and where we're willing to put our money. I'm sure you've heard the old saying, "Don't tell me what your priorities are, show me where you spend your money, and I'll tell you what your priorities are."
Right. Right. Absolutely. Um, well, so let me broaden this discussion about higher ed and financial aid. AB 1746, a bill I believe you're a co-author of,
Yes.
would help us modernize the Cal Grant system. And I'd love it if you just expand on that a little bit about the importance of that bill and what it could mean.
Yeah, it's critically important. And you know that we had a bill, myself, Assemblymember Medina and McCarty, that we worked on for 2 years, and then the governor did not sign it.
Mhm.
And it's just, Cal Grant reform is critical. Times have changed going to school. We have so many of the things that we've done here in California that we should be very proud of. Making education, especially at our community colleges, making the first year of college free, making it almost free. So many factors that make the tuition part of it easy, but we don't look at what the other realities are, which are making sure that you can pay for your books, which, my God, my girls are many years out of college, and I remember how expensive books were back then. And what about getting to class and getting to school? And what about living expenses? You know, we don't have a place for students to live on campus, especially in our community college systems, although we are kind of working on some of that this year. I believe there's a couple bills, but Cal Grant reform is critical if we want our young people and not so young people, because that's one of the things the bill will do, is lift the age
Mhm.
cap, because we don't know when people are going to be ready to go back to school. We don't know that are you lucky enough that when you graduate from high school, you are in a position where you don't have to help your family or you don't have to help yourself and you can just go to college? What if you are 25 and now's the time in your life when you can go to school? So Cal Grant reform to me is absolutely critical if we want our our young people and our not so young people to get a job and an education that will really propel them into the future. So very excited about this bill, as we have been. So my hope is that, you know, all of the education chairs are leaving. So maybe this can be our last hurrah when it comes to higher education, is getting this fixed.
So our understanding is this may cost 300 million-ish or something. I'm not sure, I guess, but how optimistic are you, and what could we do to support this gets into the budget? Because the governor is obviously not going to sign the bill unless it's part of the budget deal.
Yeah, and you know what? It's we were a little frustrated because last year when he said that, oh well, this is really a budget issue. So when he released a budget this year and it wasn't in there,
Mhm.
we were a little flummoxed and annoyed. But I just think that the squeaky wheel gets oil, and making sure that the governor's office knows that this is incredibly important, and that this is something that not just us, some of us legislators think is important, that the community and that the state is demanding, and then also having concrete examples. I always say that when, you know, not everyone has emotional intelligence, they can't think out if it's a situation they've never been in, they might not be able to relate to it. So making sure we have these stories, talking to legislators, but then if we get this to the governor's desk, talking to him, but having those conversations now, because David, you're 100% right. The May revise has not come out yet. And if we continue to put pressure on him, the hope would be is that it would be in the May revise. So
Right.
yeah, you can't knock on the door too many times, make those phone calls, try and have Zoom meetings, send letters, and the examples of how it would really change people's lives are always critically important.
Terrific. Thank you.
Welcome.
And on the K-12 side too, we're excited about that Golden State $1.5 billion and the dual enrollment $500 million. Are you very familiar with that proposal by the governor?
I'm
And
not, sorry.
yeah, so that's to really strengthen career pathways. So if you think about the continuum between early childhood that you're supporting so well, and then young people thriving through K-12 and into post-secondary. So I have a couple questions from our audience for you,
Okay.
Senator. From the Central City Association in Los Angeles, how can the state provide more flexibility for childcare facilities to be built in dense vertical downtown spaces? So as you might know, I mean, they're struggling with, in a downtown high-rise environment, those companies and those residents that live down there, they need childcare too, but it's a very different kind of real estate phenomenon.
Yes, it really is. I think that is more of a local issue. I think working with your county supervisors, working with the actual city where you're looking to build that facility or to repurpose space. And then once you get them to buy in, meaning county supervisors or the city council folks, then looking to us here in Sacramento to find the funding for it. But you know, what is it? Is it finding a space where we can, you know, you can have this a childcare.
Uh-oh. Either I've been frozen or the senator is frozen. There you are.
Okay, there we go.
Got
Sorry
you.
about that.
Sorry, just about the last 10 seconds.
Okay, so I was saying that, you know, if we working with the local folks, I think is
Yeah.
really how we get there. And then asking the state to step in and help fund it. We have lots of different programs, but I think it's hard for the state, like as the state senator, it's hard for me to, you know, go to the city of, you know, my area isn't quite as dense, but go to the city of Rialto and say, hey, you need to do this. I think it has to happen locally and tell us what you need, and then we can help fund it.
I see Mary Estrada again commented in Santa Maria. They've done an excellent job including childcare facilities and schools into all building plans. So I guess that would be like local land development policies that you've just referenced, Connie. I do think, Senator, you mentioned early in this discussion about with the GAN limit and the positive budget, we have an opportunity to do some infrastructure. And as I know, you know, and you've championed, birth to 5 infrastructure is not something we've traditionally funded. We think about K-12 and school districts and be able to do bonds and state matching, but you have in the last couple of years started to support more of that. It seems like that's probably the connecting point is, do we provide resources to build infrastructure for childcare facilities?
Yes. So I'm looking at Mary Estrada's, when her saying this needs to be statewide, it kind of reminds me of a bill I did a few years ago, SB 1000, and making sure that it's an environmental justice bill, making sure that every city, when they renew their general plan every 10 years, they have to include an environmental justice piece. Well, it kind of seems like we could do the exact same thing with Santa Maria as an example, and we could include that possibly as a statewide plan. So, Mary, we should talk about that. I don't know that we could do it this year, but it could be something that I could help one of my colleagues champion next year when I'm gone. But I like that idea. That seems like something that could absolutely work.
So we got a question from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. Nice that they're asking a question, right, Senator?
Yes.
How do we make the ECE sector an industry with a career ladder beyond entry-level work? Now, you've obviously talked about rate reimbursement, but I don't know if you want to expand a little bit about right now, if I want to get a living wage and benefits and working conditions, I can get there to be a K-12 teacher because I know I have a bargaining unit that's going to assure me that. Talk a little bit about that as it relates to attracting our next generation into birth to 5 work.
Yes, so it's a great question, and I think that the women who do this work, it's in your heart. It is just a passion. I am passionate about making sure that these women have what they need and making sure our children have what they need. I don't think I could do the job day to day. So if I am that person who this is my passion and this is what I want to do, we do have a childcare union now that was organized a couple years ago. So I think that's going to be helpful. It's still very new. It's only a couple years old. But I also think about, how do we structure childcare facilities and ECE so that maybe I start out, I kind of look at it as when I was a box person at Alpha Beta and I was entry level and then I had these different places I could go. What if I start out at an entry level and then ultimately what I want to do is own my own childcare center? But how do we do that? And what are all the steps in between? I think we can do that. And I think that we just, again, I hate to say it, just keeps coming back to money. It's hard to ask these women to continue to really give their all to our future generation when we're not paying them a livable wage. And what about medical benefits? And what about a pension? But again, we have to fund them and reimburse them at a rate that they as a provider could actually provide those things. So again, it goes back to, what do we value in California and what do we value in society? And I think we're getting there. I think that the last couple of years, we're in a better place. Like I said, the Women's Caucus has been championing this for years. For whatever reason, we're finally starting to get people to appreciate what childcare providers do. Maybe it was the pandemic and people seeing, I don't know. We have work to do.
Employers for sure became far more aware of the impact it had on their employees. Our concern, Senator, our challenge is to not waste that newfound awareness and capitalize on it now, because as time goes on, that will be a lost memory for a lot of our.
Yes, and you're 100% right, David. How do we keep it at the forefront? How do we keep pushing forward? And I'll go back to what we do here at the Capitol. How do we make sure that staff and electeds, we have a few electeds right now with very small children. So my hope is that they're going to keep this on the forefront, because they know how hard it is. If you talk to Senator Limon, she will tell you she was on like 3 or 4 waiting lists for her little daughter. And I can't remember, she told me what they got, but she said it's been over a year and she hasn't even heard back from some of the places. So my hope is we have some people that are living the experience and they will keep moving it forward. But it's up to all of us too, right? I might not be here next year, but this will always be a passion of mine. No matter what I'm doing, childcare will always be a passion because I appreciated it. I remember I could not have done my job and worked at my local union and become the president of the local union without childcare, good childcare.
Mhm. So most of these childcare providers, the CBOs, they're really small businesses,
Absolutely.
and they've been crucified really through the pandemic.
Yes.
And with rate reimbursement, which is very favorable, and some of the other things, there are supports for the individual workers, but are we doing enough for the actual businesses that can keep these centers, thriving and functioning?
So probably not. There's probably more that we can do. I know when I talked to the owner of the daycare where my granddaughter goes, sorry to keep using that as an example. It's the only real tangible example I have. She had said that when we did the hold harmless, because she had 80 kids and went down at one time to 30, but when we did the hold harmless and they were still reimbursed for the 80 that were enrolled, she said they would have had to shut their doors if we had not done that. So I think that we have to continue to be cognizant of, yes, the parents need to make sure that it's affordable for them or free if we can make that happen with universal preschool, but we also have to make sure that the preschool centers have what they need to keep their doors open.
Right. Yeah, there isn't a lot of sort of capacity dollars for the childcare sector. So that would be great. I mentioned the facilities, that's one piece, but the ongoing operating issues are crucial too. So let me just give you the privilege, Senator, of any kind of closing thoughts you have, any closing recommendations. What you have with you today is a lot of business leaders too, by the way. So tell us what we should be doing to champion these important issues.
Okay, well, first let me say thank you for having me. I did not know when I came to the legislature that I would become so passionate about education and childcare, because I thought when I got here that we kind of worked it out and things were okay. And then what I learned is that things aren't okay. And we have to keep pushing all the time to make sure that our childcare centers, our preschools have what they need. And because they are our future leaders. And for businesses, when I got hired at my local union, the president said to me, I just want you to know, if you have childcare issues, you will be fired. And I remember thinking, wow, okay. So every time one of my girls got sick, I was terrified. My husband worked full time as well. So, we would take turns on who stayed home. But I was always terrified that I was going to lose my job, because he specifically told me, you will lose your job if you have childcare issues. And they were 2.5 when I started. So, they weren't exactly grown. But we need to, as business leaders, we need to change our mindset and make sure that we are helping. If we want an employee to come to work, how do we make sure they have access? If we're a big enough company, can we provide on-site daycare? As a state, can we do something to incentivize employers to do that? I learned about unfunded mandates when I came to the legislature. And so we've tried very hard on Team Leyva to never do unfunded mandates. So we can't just tell employers do this, but what if we incentivize employers to have on-site care? And I also see Crystal Jones says, keep pushing no matter what. And that's exactly it. We can't get tired. We have to keep doing this, because you know what? People are having babies every day. People need childcare every day. It's not going to stop. It's not going to go away. So let's keep pushing. Let's keep fighting. And all of you keep advocating. And sometimes I think we all get a little tired and you think, oh my God, we're pushing this issue still. But if we don't keep fighting for this, it will get swept under the rug. It will get swept under the carpet. So continue to do what you do. I appreciate everything that you do, David, at Unite LA. And I know the Hollywood Chamber is on, but all of our chambers, whatever we can do to to help small businesses, to help these women. Childcare centers are 98% run by women, and women of color, 70%. How do we help them to be successful? So I guess I don't have great advice. I wish I had like a little magic wand and I could say, boom, if we do this, everything will happen perfectly. But I do know that if we don't let our foot off the pedal and we keep going, we will make a change. I mean, 246 rate reform took 3 years.
Mhm.
And so once you know something will work, we just have to have that passion to keep going. And nothing beats passion. People used to tell me, don't fall in love with your bills. And I said, I have to fall in love with my bills. If I don't fall in love with them, I won't have that passion to get them across the finish line. And I guess I would say that to all of you. Let's keep the passion going. Let's work together, and we can really change the future. This will be so good for the state of California, so good for working families, and even for folks who don't have children. They're going to benefit because employees will be able to come to work, and like I said, these kids will someday be our future leaders.
Yeah, I mean, the employers we work with, they understand, you said it earlier, if you're going to attract and retain the best talent, they have to believe that you are going to support their whole person, not just their role as employee, but they as a parent, they as a spouse or a family member, elder care as well, that you're going to support them as they have people aging, which I will be, I'll be in that bucket before long. So thank you so much, Senator. I mean, most importantly, thank you for your service and your leadership in California, but thank you for hanging out with us today. I know I can see by the comments, people really enjoyed hearing from you. They're inspired by your leadership on these issues and so many others. And if I can end with just a thank you also to the Hollywood Chamber and all of you that participated today, and do a tiny commercial. So bear with me 1 second, Senator. Next month, we're going to have a session on the digital divide. United LA is joined with the LA Economic Development Corporation to eliminate the digital divide in LA County and support those that are doing it throughout the state. And so we're going to bring to you a really exciting, important agenda about what needs to happen so we eliminate the digital divide. And Senator, I don't know if that's an issue that you track with that much, but if you want to say anything about that, I welcome it.
I would just say that I was Superintendent Thurman put me on the digital divide. I was his co-chair on the digital divide task force during the pandemic. Oh my goodness gracious. Another thing that was of such big importance. We knew that having connection to the internet, having devices was so important, but we really, really felt the pressure of that during the pandemic when we sent our kids home and said, hey, you're going to do Zoom school now. And, not all of them had access to the internet or affordable internet. I will say that we have done a lot of good legislation. There's more good legislation coming this year, but that's another one. Let's not let our foot off the gas and make sure that we wouldn't be here today if I didn't have good connectivity and all of you didn't have good connectivity. So we need to keep working on that as well. So I'm glad you're going to be addressing that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Senator. And thank you to all the participants. Everyone stay healthy.
Yes. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, David.
Bye-bye.